Markets never operate on chance. What appears to be random swings, sudden crashes, or miraculous gains is almost always the result of hidden structures, patterns, and forces that very few can see or comprehend. Imagine a system so intricate that billions of dollars move in milliseconds. Reactions are triggered before most people even notice a signal, and the decisions of a few influence the financial fate of millions. The story of global markets is not one of luck or chaos, it is a story of invisible architecture, careful orchestration, and repeating rhythms that have guided wealth for centuries. To truly understand how the world economy functions, we must look beyond headlines, beyond stocks, and beyond the momentary trends, and instead focus on the deep mechanics that quietly determine outcomes. The origins of these structures date back to the earliest days of trade. Long before electronic trading platforms and instant communication, merchants, bankers, and rulers discovered that money, influence, and information were inseparable. Wealth was no longer just land or goods, it was knowledge, timing, and leverage. Those who mastered not only accumulation but also movement of capital could shape economies in ways invisible to the majority. Early networks of credit, debt, and exchange laid the foundation for what would evolve into global markets. Patterns emerged in the flow of resources, the timing of transactions, and the orchestration of information, revealing that even centuries ago, markets responded more to perception and anticipation than to simple supply and demand. As global trade expanded, these networks became more sophisticated. By the industrial era, wealth was not just stored, it was mobilized. Capital moved along complex corridors across continents, silently reshaping economies in the shadows of politics and public awareness. The rise of banking institutions combined with increasing connectivity between nations amplified influence. Decisions made in one city could ripple across oceans, producing consequences in places that seemed entirely unrelated. Observers who understood these connections realized that markets were less about chance and more about structure. Patterns of accumulation, speculation, and strategic timing dictated outcomes long before the public noticed the shifts. The 20th century accelerated these dynamics dramatically. Communication became instantaneous. Technology enabled rapid capital flows, and global institutions further connected economies. The creation of international financial organizations and the standardization of monetary systems ensured that actions in one country could affect markets worldwide. Subtle cues, policy announcements, interest rate adjustments, or liquidity changes became signals that propagated through the system. The invisible scaffolding of the economy transformed individual choices into collective outcomes, often producing dramatic effects with surprising speed. This interconnectedness introduced both power and fragility. While wealth could flow efficiently, small disruptions could escalate quickly. The bursting of speculative bubbles or the sudden collapse of a currency rarely came from a single cause. They were cumulative outcomes of structural pressures, human behavior, and global interdependencies. Confidence, fear, and anticipation became amplifiers within the system, and once a tipping point was reached, the consequences could be catastrophic. Historical crises from the Great Depression to modern financial meltdowns reveal that markets are designed to magnify these interactions. What appears as chaos is actually the predictable outcome of underlying architecture and human psychology interacting. The advent of electronic trading and algorithmic systems intensified these dynamics. Orders placed in microseconds, global arbitrage, and automated reactions transformed markets into real-time feedback loops. Price movements no longer reflected only fundamentals, they reflected perception, anticipation, and instantaneous human-machine responses. Small changes in one sector could cascade globally before any manual intervention could occur. These mechanisms create the illusion of randomness, but underneath, they operate according to rules that are structured, measurable, and deeply interconnected. Human behavior remains central to this structure. Greed, fear, and anticipation drive cycles of boom and bust. But these emotions are amplified by the architecture of markets. Patterns of confidence build slowly, often unnoticed, and collapse can occur abruptly, leaving many surprised despite the predictable dynamics at play. Market participants are simultaneously shaping and being shaped by the system. Every trade, every reaction, and every expectation feeds back into the network, creating repeating cycles that have persisted for centuries. Policy interventions demonstrate another layer of complexity. Central banks, governments, and regulators intervene to stabilize markets, but these actions enter the same structure, influencing perception and behavior. Interest rate adjustments, Quantitative easing and regulatory changes do not exist outside the system, they become part of the invisible rules that dictate market behavior. Often, the very measures intended to prevent instability can set the stage for the next cycle of volatility. Markets are self-reinforcing systems that adapt to both natural forces and human intervention, producing outcomes that appear sudden but are the inevitable result of deep design. Historical examples reinforce this reality. The 2008 financial crisis seemed unpredictable to many, yet it was the natural outcome of leveraged positions, interbank dependencies, and global capital flows interacting with human behavior. Every financial crisis shows the same repeating patterns: accumulation, overconfidence, misperception, and sudden correction. Understanding these structural patterns provides insight into why markets behave as they do and why certain outcomes are inevitable given the architecture in place. Modern markets continue to follow these principles. Cryptocurrency markets, high-frequency trading, and global equities exhibit the same hidden structure, magnified by technology. Volatility is often the result of the same interplay between human behavior and systemic mechanics that has existed for centuries. The tools and instruments have evolved, but the rhythms remain remarkably consistent. Predicting outcomes becomes a matter of recognizing the signals embedded in the system rather than relying on luck or superficial trends. From these insights, three crucial lessons emerge. First, markets operate according to deep structural rules, not random chance. Recognizing these patterns enables more informed decisions and a clearer understanding of risk. Second, human psychology is inseparable from market dynamics. Greed, fear, and anticipation amplify outcomes, creating cycles that repeat across history. Third, interventions and policy measures are part of the system, influencing perception, behavior, and the rhythm of markets. Understanding these relationships allows individuals and institutions to anticipate trends and navigate complex financial landscapes. The warning is clear: predictability does not equal safety. Misinterpreting signals or ignoring the structure can transform small misalignments into crises. Markets are not inherently fair or chaotic, they are deeply systematic. Those who fail to understand the architecture of wealth movement are more likely to be caught unprepared. Awareness, analysis, and foresight are essential for navigating this interconnected world. In conclusion, the deep structure of markets is invisible but omnipresent. It governs the flow of capital, the cycles of boom and bust, and the perception of stability or chaos. Crises are rarely accidents. They are predictable consequences of human behavior interacting with systemic architecture. Recognizing these patterns allows participants to act as informed navigators rather than passive observers, understanding not only what happens in markets, but why it happens. Beneath the surface of apparent randomness lies an intricate system that has silently shaped wealth, risk, and opportunity for centuries and will continue to do so in the future.